time for us to start. We're going to learn today. We had a really tragic occurrence yesterday of three soldiers who were murdered. So we're going to learn Ilui Neshamot, Leah Ben Nun, Ori Yitzhak Iluz, and Ohad Dahan.
So by the Egyptian.
ירצו מלפניך אדוני אלוהינו ואבותינו שלא אירע דבר תקלה על ידי ולא אכשל בדבר אליך וישמחו בי חבריי שלא אמר על טמא טהור ולא טהור טמא ולא על מותר אסור ולא אסור מותר ולא יקשרו חבריי בדבר אליך ואשמח בהם כי אדוני ייתן חוכמה מפיו דת ותבונה גל עיניי והביטת נפלאות מתורתך. We talked last time about the notion of belief and the Jewish notion of belief, which I think is a very strong argument to make that it's not what we in the modern Western concept, which is heavily influenced by Christianity, think of belief as something that's inside our head. Because what's inside our head, anybody who's ever just sat quietly for 10 minutes, or especially if you've ever practiced meditation, you know that what's inside our head is totally random, totally not under our control. Stuff rises, it's like, where did that thought come from? I have no idea. I don't know what goes on inside of my own head. All right, so Jewish belief is actually a set of behaviors. And as Rambam has told us over and over again, from the Talmudic dictum that you do something because we're supposed to do it, not because we don't wait until we feel connected to God before we do the mitzvot, because mitoch shelo lishma ba lishma. From doing something over and over again, only because we're told that this is the way we're supposed to do it, that trains us, and ultimately it imbues us with Torah values, imbues us with proper moral values, and it's from morality meaning the individual's inner sense of what is right and wrong, and it's from morality that we then can connect to ethical systems. An ethical system is a system of behaviors where people's moralities can connect together to run a society, to run a functioning society.
It's like behavioral psychology.
It is. It's very much so. Yes, I think Rambam's approach is very, behavior modification type of therapy. And as we've seen, and this is something Chanok you just mentioned about next week's parsha about the spies. We see it over and over again during our wandering in the Midbar, right? Not feeling God's constant presence leads to a sense of distance and a sense of estrangement and ultimately a sense of abandonment. And again, I think while we're learning these, Hilchot Avodat Kochavim, I think it's very important for us to go back to Rambam's first description in Yesodei Torah, the second paragraph, second paragraph, where he says, contemplating the wonders of creation leads to an appreciation of God's infinite wisdom, and this in turn causes us to love and to glorify and to desire to, as he says, to know God's great name, which then translates for Rambam into a desire to spend our entire lives trying to know God's true nature, God's truth, right? But the human response of awe and spiritual yearning, that's something that's innate to us, according to what we've learned in Rambam.
Can you repeat it, please?
Yes, that Rambam says when a human being looks at the works of creation, we are inspired with awe. So this is not a Jewish response, and it's not a Torah response. It's human beings, right? And I think it's important to remember that, because when we're talking about Avodah Zarah, Avodat Kochavim, we're talking about going back to that primal response. That I look at creation, I look at the world, I say, oh, this is amazing, I want to connect to and worship and understand the being, or maybe the beings, or maybe the whole family of beings, or I don't know, or the whole generations of beings who created this, right? And so we have, every culture has its own complex, creation myth, right? And there's, there's the sea monster, and there's the hero, and there's the brother and sister who kill each other, and there's the son who kills the father, and all kinds of creation myths, okay? But I think that it's, so look what happens, right? This human response of awe and a spiritual yearning, which precedes the giving of the Torah, and in fact it precedes, if you will, God's direct communication with us, right? God creates Adam, and Chabad speaks to them. After Cain, God doesn't speak to humans until Noah. So it's 10 generations from Adam to Noah. And after Noah, 10 generations to Abraham. Okay? So, in the absence of God's direct interaction with humanity, I think we should assume that Rambam's spiritual awakening process that he describes at the beginning of the Torah, that goes on in every generation. So, again, he starts this sefer bringing the Midrash, which is an interesting taich of the verb achel that began. It said that, and then the achel likro b'shem Hashem, which literally means people started to call on the name of God. But the Midrash says that they started to what's the word I'm looking for? They started to desanctify, to defile the name of God. Okay, using the verb hal, which means to begin, but taking the shoresh from like the word chol, like kodesh v'chol, which we said last night, for example. Okay, and so this avodah zarah, star worship, it's a mistaken replacement for the worship of the one true God. Although in the instances where the Midrash talks about it, it's before the giving of Torah. So maybe too much to expect of humanity to recognize the one true God before the giving of Torah. But that whole purpose of that Midrash, and the reason that Rambam brings it, is to lead us to the image and to the model of Avraham Avinu, who on his own recognizes the one true God. So I want to suggest that the urge to outright idol worship, to carving statues and to bowing down in front of them, it's a kind of it resonates with like early childhood, right? On a primal level, this passionate, active expectation of waiting for God, or waiting for the Messiah, or waiting for the Redeemer, whatever. It's kind of a form of the game of peekaboo, right? That the infant is there and everything is great, and then mommy goes, "Where's mommy? Where's mommy?" And the infant, like, moment of expectation, then mommy goes, "Peekaboo!" And the infant is all smiles and laughter, right? And notice, if you play the game of peekaboo with the infant, if you keep your face hidden for too long, the infant gets distressed and starts to cry. Which is sort of what happened when we built the Egel Hazahav, when we built the golden calf, okay? We're not so far from that. So it's very important, I want to suggest, for us to understand really primal human forces and human needs that drive our desire to connect. And I want to suggest that for all of we're reading the halachas of Avodah Zarah and how problematic they are, they're that much more problematic because they're fundamentally very, very tied to really, really basic primal forces within each of us. So it's very easy to say, nowadays, those of us who, Baruch Hashem, grow up, surrounded by Torah and living in a Jewish community, and we're living in Jerusalem, and so it's very easy, I've had occasion to be talking about these Midrashim, for example, and people saying, well, if I were there in Ur Kasdim, I would have been right along with Abraham, and I would have broken all the idols right along with him. And the answer is no, absolutely you would not. I guarantee you would not. Because you're a product of your environment just like I am, and just like everybody else is. And that's the whole purpose of that Mishnah, is to say how difficult it is for a human being to rise above their environment. That Avraham Avinu, it's like once in human history that a person actually rose above his environment to the extent that God finally said, okay, great, now I have a partner. Right? So let's just bear in mind that we need to really, all of the things that we're reading that we look at so negatively, we need to understand how deeply they resonate within each one of us. Rambam is not talking to us about somebody else. Rambam is talking to us about us. Okay? A person who makes a vow or takes an oath in the name of a false god gets lashes. This applies to one who takes an oath for his own reasons and to one who takes an oath because of a Gentile. It's forbidden to have a Gentile take an oath on his deity. It's even forbidden to mention the name of a Gentile deity without connection to an oath. Which, Rabbi Nachman, for example, says that when we're learning Torah in English, for example, that we shouldn't say God. Because God is a non-Jewish designator for, and when the non-Jews say God, we don't know what they have in mind. Interesting. A person should not tell somebody else, wait for me near the such and such statue, idol of a false deity. Right? It's permitted to mention the name of a false deity that's mentioned in the Bible, such as Peor and Baal and Nevo and so on, but it's forbidden to cause others to take oaths or vows in the name of them. And in regard to all of these prohibitions, The only one who gets actually punished, gets lashes, is one who makes a vow or an oath in the name of that deity. Okay. So again, a lot of these, this is very rich and very, very explicit, very specific kind of inside baseball type of halachas. And there's a lot more pages left in this sefer. So, sixth parak. Anyone who willingly or consciously in an act of defiance performs the activities associated with an ov or yidoni is liable for karet. Okay, od and yidoni are these deities that foretell the future, right? So, like when Shaul went to the witch of Endor and she conjured up the spirit of Shmuel, for example. They get karet. So karet basically means being cut off, and it's not 100% clear. There are different interpretations of what it means. It means that somebody will die before their time, or somebody will see their own children die during their lifetime, meaning that when you're dead, and there's nothing left. No olam haba, no descendants, you didn't leave a roshem, you left no imprint on the world. And if witnesses were present and warned them, then they should be stoned to death. And if he did it inadvertently, he has to bring a sin offering. What do these deeds associated with an ov involve? A person stands up and offers incense. He holds a wand of myrtle in his hand and waves it while whispering an incantation. This continues until the person making the inquiry hears a voice, as if another person speaking to him and replying to his questions. So we're talking about, a medium, sorcery. We're talking about, calling up the spirits from the other world. It appears as if the words are coming from below the earth in a very low tone, to the extent that they can't be perceived by the ear, but only sensed in thought. It's like, oh, wait, does somebody here want to talk to George? George is looking for you. George, yes, you wanted to talk to George. Okay. Similarly, among the deeds associated with an ov is taking the skull of a corpse and offering incense and chanting incantations until one hears a voice in a very low tone emanating from one's armpits and replying to the questions. Anyone who performs one of these acts should be stoned to death. I don't think we need to comment on this. What do deeds associated with the yidoni involve? A person places a bone from a bird, whose name is Yidua, in his mouth, offers incense, and performs other deeds until he falls into a trance and reveals events that will occur in the future. All of these are forms of idol worship. What's the source for the warning against them? Is Al tifnu el ha'ovot ve'el ha'yidonim. Do not turn to the ovot or the yidonim. So clearly these were forms of telling the future that were common in, certainly in the world of the Torah at the time that the Torah was given. And we know of cultures where something similar to this continues to be common to this day. Anyone who willingly, as an act of defiance, gives of his progeny to Molech is liable for karet. If he did so inadvertently, he has to bring a sin offering. If witnesses were present and warned him, he's stoned to death. Which verse serves as a warning of prohibition? A person who gives his seed to Molech shall die, right? And we know about, so he's describing how it was done, right? The Molech is the one that you pass your children through the fire. It's not clear whether the children were actually burned to death or there was just some kind of ritual act. What was done, a person kindles a great fire in front of the idol and then takes some of his children and gives them to the priests who served the fire. And after the child was given to them, the priest would return the son to his father to pass through the fire. And the father of the child is the one who passes his child through the fire with the priest's permission. He passes him through the fire from one side to the other, his feet in the midst of the flames, and thus the father does not cremate his son to Molech, as sons and daughters are cremated to the worship of other deities. Rather, this form of worship, called Molech, involved merely passing the child through the fire. Therefore, if one performs this service to a deity other than Molech, one is not punished. Right? Interesting, right? So, just bear in mind that, as with all of the prohibitions of the Torah, in order for one to actually get the punishment that's associated with the prohibited act, the act must be performed explicitly as is described in the prohibition, right? Meaning, you, God forbid, you're not allowed to take your child down to Gei Ben Hinnom, where they used to do it, and light the fire and walk your child back and forth through the fire in front of a statue of Molech. However, if you put up a statue of Jesus or of Buddha or of any other god and do the same action, it's not really smart, but you don't get punished for it. Prohibition against giving one's progeny to, one is not liable for karet or stoning until one gives over his son to Molech. If he gives him over but does not pass him through the flames, or passes him through the flames without giving him over to the priest, or give him over and passes him through the flames but doesn't carry him, he's not liable. The prohibition against giving one's progeny to Molech includes legitimate and illegitimate sons and daughters, children and grandchildren. One is liable for giving over any of one's descendants because they're all included in the term progeny. In contrast, if one passes one's brothers, one's sisters, or one's ancestors through the fire, or if one passes through the fire as oneself, no liability.
What about the mother-in-law?
It's a whole masechta for that. A monument which the Torah has forbidden is a structure around which people gather. The prohibition applies even when it was constructed for the service of God, because this appears as a pagan practice. So if people set up a big statue for some other deity in order to gather around it, then we are not supposed to honor it. Person who bows down on the kneeling stone mentioned in the Torah is liable for lashes, even if he prostrates himself upon it to God Hashem. So it's the Evan Maskit. Okay, on Yom Kippur, where we do the Avodah, many people have the custom to go down on hands and knees and say Baruch Shem Kavod, right? And you know that when you do that, you're supposed to put like a towel under your knees, or under your knees and your hands, right? It's exactly this prohibition, because we're not allowed to just lie down on a stone on the floor and prostrate ourselves in front of God, even in front of God, outside the Beit HaMikdash, even in front of God. So
I've seen people bowing on the grave of parents.
Mazel tov, and they're not Chinese.
What about that?
I think Rambam was critical of various practices regarding visiting graves, but he was makil about it. He said this is what people need to do. Explicitly bowing down on the grave or prostrating oneself on the grave of one's parent, I can't say. But I was just saying in general, there's a whole, some people, they go to visit the Kivrei Tzadikim. And then there's this thing about, they take the red thread and they wind it around the kever of the tzaddik, and then they cut up little pieces and people wear it around their wrist for, and they think it's not Avodah Zarah. They think this is genuine Torah. Okay. Anyway, so Rambam, which, by the way, that whole practice of the red thread around the wrist, it comes from Hinduism. Just so you know. Yeah, it's a Brahmin practice. Right? If you ever seen Brahmins, from Brahmins, they have a red cord that they wear, the men anyway, that they wear. It goes over the shoulder and under the groin, and it goes around their body, and they wear it their entire life. So as they grow older, they lengthen it.
I thought it came from Yeshua.
I thought it came from Madonna.
From Yeshua and his wife. She was she had the red. She was saved because of the red.
I'm missing it. Sorry. Oh, you mean Rahab?
Rahab, yes.
Anyway, every place outside of the Beit HaMikdash is prohibited to prostrate oneself. In the Beit HaMikdash, it is permitted to prostrate oneself to God on the bare stone. Okay, so there are, especially among Sephardim, for example, when they come to the Avodat Yom HaKippurim in the Yom Kippur service, in a lot of Sephardic communities, Ashkenazi communities, people generally go down on all fours. But you'll notice that, if you're in an organized shul in America, for example, there'll be couple of the young guys will go out handing out paper towels to everybody, right? And when I first experienced, I thought, they're using paper towels to protect my suit from getting, from getting dirty, right? But no, it's because of this prohibition. Okay, and in a lot of Sephardic communities, people don't even go down on the floor; they just bow. It's a v'yishtachav, היו קוראים ומשתחווים, they just bow, umodim, right? They just bow, right? Instead of going down onto the floor.
The prohibition specifically is what?
Prostrating oneself upon the ground. Period.
Not on cut stone. That's something different or something like that.
There was, I mean, kneeling on stone is the explicit source of it, if you will. Even maskit is the pasuk. It's not 100% clear what maskit means. Even maskit. It's a kneeling stone is the way he translates it here. It says the pagans would customarily place a stone before a false deity so that they could prostrate themselves upon it. Therefore, this practice is not followed in the worship of God. Maybe we could say, if you've ever been in a Catholic church, where they have kneelers on the pews, right? When they pray, they kneel. Okay? So we could say that this is a derivation of this from the same source, of kneeling, and kneeling is the first act towards prostrating oneself, right? So they have the pews in front of them that they lean on, so they don't get completely prostrated. Okay.
What about down if the synagogue's carpeted, right? Is there a problem prostrating themselves on the carpeted floor?
It's not done. It's not done. If it's carpeted on Yom Kippur, you'll still see people putting towels under their knees or paper towels or whatever. Or there are people who have I davened once with this guy who has like a cloth that's like embroidered explicitly for that purpose. Like once a year he pulls it out of his talit, his koracha, and he bows down on it. It's like, no. So the answer is no, you don't do it. You have to have something between you and the floor. And the carpet doesn't count.
What if you do yoga?
If you do what?
Yoga.
You're not doing it as a form of worship. Continuing. A person who prostrates himself to God upon paved stones without spreading out his hands and feet is not punished. So again, we're just kind of specifying.
I'm just thinking, I do yoga also. One of the exercises is that, and it's on cut stone, so is it forbidden to do that?
Okay, and when you go down on cut stone and you do that prostration exercise, do you say Baruch Shem Kavod?
No, I'm not.
Or do you say, oh God of yoga, I worship you and adore you?
So it doesn't matter then, right?
Phew, what a relief.
So, if it's not a worship, you can do it.
One who prostrates himself to a false deity should be stoned to death, whether or not he spreads out his hands and feet. Okay? One who prostrates himself to God, it's usher. I would say don't worry about it. I'm not asking for anybody, but I wouldn't worry about it. You're not doing it as a form of worship.
Yes,
although a lot of the yoga postures are called worshiping postures, right? So you do like the corpse posture, which you do on your back, and then was it the baby posture that you do on your face? I can't remember what it's called. Right, there's downward dog, and you go down, right? But there's a sequence that you do. It's like a 12-move sequence where you go up and out and then down, and then you crawl out, and then you come back up, and right? And that's the sun worship sequence, right? Which one does at sunrise facing west. One offers one's backside to the sun. Don't ask. I only work here. Okay. A person who plants a tree near the altar or anywhere in the temple courtyard, regardless of whether it's a fruit tree or not, is punished by lashes. Because it says, "Lo tita'alecha asherah." Do not plant an asherah or any other tree near the altar of God. So this is in the Beit HaMikdash we're talking about. This applies even if one does so in order to beautify the temple and to make it more attractive. Why? Because this was a pagan practice that the pagans used to plant trees near their altars so that people would come and gather there. And so they would say, instead of saying go to the altar, because the altar was like a little table somewhere, right? They'd say, oh, that great big beautiful pine tree, that's where we're going to gather. They go to the pine tree, and next to the pine tree is the altar. It's like every time I read these halachas, I remember the old Yankee Stadium. I don't know if any of you remember. Meet me at the bat. Anybody get it, right? The bat, Yankee Stadium, there was this big baseball bat. It was like 40 feet high. And that was a place that people knew that we're going to go to the game. Okay, I'll meet you at the bat. But there was no, although for some, depending, like we lived in the Bronx, so there were a lot of people, a lot of our neighbors for whom the Yankee Stadium was the Beis HaMikdash.
Yeah. In Philadelphia, where I lived, there was a Wanamaker's department store right across from City Hall.
Okay.
and they have this big like bronze statue of an eagle.
Okay.
And everybody, that was the expression, meet the eagle.
Fly, eagles, fly.
And
Right.
I never saw anybody prospect themselves to it. There you go.
Whoa! Fly, eagles, fly. Okay, next parak. Okay, we're just barreling along here. It's a positive commandment to destroy false deities and all of their accessories and anything that's made for the purpose of their worship, because it says abed ta'abedun et kol ha'mokomot. It says you shall surely destroy all the places where the Gentiles serve their gods.
So what do we do it?
In Eretz Israel, the mitzvah requires us to hunt after idol worship until it's eradicated from our entire land. In the diaspora, however, we are not required to hunt after it. Rather, whenever we conquer a place, we destroy all of the false deities contained in it. Yes, sir?
So what's today? I mean, there's all these Christian statues, and especially the Greek Orthodox Church, right? Was there any obligation today to do anything or not in Israel? You have to wait until Mashiach comes in the base of Mikdash.
No, a Christian theologian, a good friend of mine actually, who was a Christian theologian and a Franciscan monk, who is now an Orthodox Jew, explained to me that the theology of the church is that all of these statues and icons and everything are intended as kind of inspiration, but it is absolutely forbidden to bow down to the image. That one does not bow to the image. The only thing that one bows to in the Catholic Church is the host, the piece of bread, when the priest elevates it, because in their theology that is about to become the actual body of Christ. And as Rambam says at the end of, the very end of Mishneh Torah, which Bezrat Hashem will get to, it's going to take us more than a couple of weeks. At the end of the last book, Hilchot Melachim, Milchamoteim, the laws of kings and wars, it's the next to last chapter, and he says that Christianity, and we mentioned this just a couple of weeks ago, he says, this Jesus guy created a lot of problems for us, and Muhammad created a lot of problems for us, and their religions have created a lot of problems for us, but the ways of God are mysterious. And Rambam, although Rambam says that Trinitarian Christianity is absolutely avodah zarah, it's not a true religion. And since he didn't live to see Protestantism, we don't know what he would say about non-Trinitarian Christianity, or about newer developments in Christian theology where they articulate more clearly that it's one God with three aspects, or whatever. But he says, nonetheless, Christianity, and for all the trouble and all the devastation they've caused for the Jewish people, Christianity and Islam they point in the direction of the true religion, of the true worship of the true God. Right? And I would say that Rambam's position on whether Christianity or Islam are true is that to the extent that that individual observances within those religions or individual practices within those religions, to the extent that those observances and practices mirror or emanate from Torah practices, then those are true practices. But I think we can say that Rambam does not accept that the God of Christianity or the God of Islam are, quote-unquote, the true God. That there's like misinterpretation there.
Yes, but nevertheless, why not we destroy the images?
Well, so again, the images are, the question is what's the purpose of the images? If the purpose of the images is for some kind of a spiritual aide-memoire and a decoration, then they're not actually bowing down to them, they're not actually worshiping them. And the other reason that we don't do it is because, Darchei Shalom, to put it simply, and Ve'ahavta Dager, that these are people who are part of our society, so we are obligated to treat them with respect.
As they do with us.
So the question is, what are we obligated to destroy? I'm not going to paskin on it. I don't paskin for people anyway. But I would say that we have a lot of other things to worry about before we start worrying about whether we should be trashing churches and mosques in the old city of Jerusalem, for example. We have a lot of other things that we need to address.
Excuse me. It's not an answer saying we have a lot of
No, but
issues. If there is a law, there is a law.
that's true. But what I'm saying is that the explicit prohibitions which relate to people worshiping an idol, there's a very strong argument to make that traditional Christianity and Islam are not idol worship. Catholicism is not a monotheistic religion according to Rambam. That's different. But they don't worship the physical idol. They have a lot of statues and stuff. Okay, and I would say that even from what my friend tells me, my friend who's now the very frum Orthodox Jew tells me that there are a lot of Catholics who don't understand it either. That they think the purpose of having the statues in the church is for them to bow down to the statue and worship the statue. And he said he spent his whole career as a friar telling people, no, you don't worship the statue. It's there to remind you. It's there to inspire you. It's, lahavdil, why do we read Tehillim?
Why do we read Tehillim?
Why do we read Tehillim? Anybody?
To connect.
To connect how? Like what?
To connect how? The world was created with the words.
No, okay.
We connect with words.
Okay, but why do we read Tehillim? So, God forbid, somebody's sick. We read Tehillim for them. What do we think that does?
It's like a prayer.
But what does it do? Is it like a magic incantation? I read Tehillim and it's supposed to make somebody get better?
Words are creating.
Is it a magic incantation?
No.
A lot of people believe that they read Tehillim for somebody, it'll make that person get healthy. They read Tehillim for somebody, it'll make them successful. They read Tehillim for somebody, it'll protect them. Okay? What they're doing is very similar to the Catholic who thinks that the purpose of the statue of the Virgin Mary is for me to bow down and worship the statue. Okay? The reason that we read Tehillim is it's not a magical incantation, right? We inspire ourselves to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the way that David HaMelech connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the hope is that by us trying to inhabit, if you will, the spiritual world of David HaMelech, that we will then bring ourselves closer to God and bring God closer to us. It's kind of like to remind God, if you will, of that relationship, right? That David HaMelech was a very problematic person, but for all of the trouble that he had in his life and all the problems that he caused in his life and all the bad things that he did, fundamentally he wanted to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so it's an expression of our yearning to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we connect through the words of the person who most embodies that yearning to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
So there is no shefa.
I'm not saying there is or there isn't. I'm not saying there is and there isn't. What I'm saying is that the purpose of reading Tehillim is it's not a magical incantation. And a lot of people seem to think that, I read Tehillim and they got sicker.
Is shefa an incantation?
It's not a magical incantation. That's
Shefa.
what I'm saying. No, I'm saying reading Tehillim, it's not like a magical formula. There are people who they say, I read Tehillim, and still, the person died.
No, but isn't the intent of reading Tehillim part of a gateway or setting the environment to draw us closer to the spirit of Hashem, so
yes.
that we can hear and listen to what Hashem's guidance.
I think so, yes. And all I'm saying is that when people, that I quite often hear people saying things like that imply what they're thinking is like, if I read Tehillim, then it'll be good. It's going to make it good, right? Or don't worry, I have faith. What does that mean? I have faith. I have what? Somebody's sick, but don't worry, I have bitachon. What? That they're going to get better because I want them to. God's going to do what I want God to do because I want God to do it. Okay, so what I think one of the great strengths of Rambam is that over and over and over again he exhorts us to approach our religion from an adult perspective, and not from the perspective of the primitive mind or the child mind or the wish fulfillment mind. And And so, you know, again, this is what we said before, that before we start criticizing other people for their forms of idol worship, we need to look at how this resonates with us. Yes, sir?
So how does Rambam view Baal Tshuva if some of the punishments are so harsh, death, and how do you say, all right, I made a mistake in my earlier life and now I'm become Baal? How does he get from there to there? Or does he
Amazing.
Not, or does he not address Baal Tshuva?
Oh, no, he does. He does. So, Be'ezrat Hashem, so housekeeping.
So
okay, this is a very long sefer. We still have, oh my God, I can't tell you.
So it's not for today.
No. So this has 12 prakim. We're in the middle of parak, the 7th parak, okay? Be'ezrat Hashem, we will try to finish this in the next few weeks, I'm not sure. The month of July, I'm not going to be here. And then the month of August,
won't be here.
Right, the month of August and into the Chagim, Be'ezrat Hashem will be doing the last book of Sefer Mada, which is Hilchot Teshuvah, where he talks about the Baal Teshuvah. And he says, you know, he quotes the famous line from the Gemara, "Makom she Baalei Teshuvah omdim, tzadikim gemorim ein omdim alei." But in the place where Baal Teshuvah stands, even the greatest tzaddik cannot come to that point, right? So, and ein davar sheomed bifnei Teshuvah. There's nothing that can stand in the way of Teshuvah. Teshuvah itself is a fundamental and incredibly powerful force. And just because we have a written halakha, I mean, Rambam is giving us the halachas, right? Rambam was a very smart guy. Rambam learned all these halachas, he learned the Gemara, he got it all put together, and he said, if you just read this checklist, this will tell you how to be a good Jew. And you don't need to do all the learning on your own, because I've done it all for you. And basically, I would say he's accurate, okay? So he's giving us halachas here. The fact that there's a halacha that says when that we have to destroy idols that are put up in the land of Israel doesn't mean that we do it all. The fact that it says that we have to, stone somebody to death because they were mechalel Shabbat in public doesn't mean that we do it. Okay. The fact that we say somebody, I know Kohanim who are married to divorcees and they still go up and they do Nasiat Kapayim. Okay. For example, so you can pick any of a range of things that it's prohibited to do or it's obligated for us to do, and we do it or we don't do it. Okay. So the question is not why are we not perfect. The question is, how does the halacha enable us to improve our lives? Okay, so I think your question is exactly on point, right? Because halacha is, when as a rabbi, people call me up, what do people call me with? 9 times out of 10, or 99 times out of 100. Ask any rav, right? What do people call? They say, Erev Shabbos, I used the wrong spoon in the cholent. What do I do? Right? So it's like, so much of halacha is b'diavad, it's after the fact. Oh, I thought I was doing something right and I did something wrong, how do I fix it? Right? So,
can I go back to
magic, please.
What about Birchat Kohanim?
Nothing up my sleeve. What about it?
Birchat Kohanim.
What about it?
According to him, is it magic or not?
It's not magic. It's the Torah tells us that we get a bracha. Comes
What
through
is
the
it?
Kohanim.
What is it?
It's God emanating through the Kohanim. It's God's bracha that comes through the Kohanim. The Kohanim don't have the power to give the bracha. The Kohen is like a lamp. You plug it in and the light goes on.
I mean,
Right.
yes. Isn't the same with Tehillim?
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
No. Tehillim, no. I think it's not. It's forbidden to benefit from an animal that was sacrificed to false deities in its entirety, even its excrement, its bones, its horns, its hooves, and the hide. Forbidden to take any benefit from the animal at all. What's the difference between an idol belonging to a Gentile and an idol belonging to a Jew? It is forbidden to benefit from an idol belonging to a Gentile immediately after it's fashioned. In contrast, it's not forbidden to benefit from the idol that belongs to a Jew until and unless the Jew worships it. Okay, so if you go visit your frum friend who is a collector of, Oriental porcelains, right? And they have all these statues of Buddha on the shelf, right? Oh, this one is from the Ting dynasty, the Bing dynasty, the Ching Ching Dang Dang, whatever. This is this is 800 years old. This is 1,000 years old. They're beautiful, right? Do you bow down? What, are you kidding me? Okay. Right.
The question has been raised that you go to the Israel Museum
Yes.
and they got all these little idols. cases full of them.
Very good.
And can you look at, can you look at them? Because they're owned by Jews now. I guess the museum is
Are they owned by the Jews or are they owned by the State of Israel?
the state of Israel.
Right. The accessories of idol worship are not forbidden unless they were actually used for the purpose of idol worship. So the simple halacha, again, I'm not posking for anybody, but the simple halacha is once an idol has been abandoned by its worshiper. So, somebody makes a thing to worship and they bow down to it and it doesn't do what they want. So they say, you know what, this idol is no good anymore. But you think it's pretty, you want it, you can put it on your mantelpiece. Okay? So now it's mutar for us to use it because it's no longer an object of worship. Okay? I suppose we can make the argument, I don't know, it's an interesting halachic question. In the Israel Museum, like the people who worshipped those particular statues are no longer alive. And the cult of those statues is no longer functioning. And they're certainly not in the museum for anybody to worship. It would be interesting what would happen, like if we're walking through the museum and we're walking, and all of a sudden we see people bowing down in front of one of the cases with statues in it. What would we have to do,
Get our money back.
Bowing to an empty case.
Bowing to an empty case. Shem mishtachavim lehevel v'rik. They bow down in front of nothingness. Right? It's only forbidden to benefit from the idol belonging to a Jew when the Jew worships it. When a person makes an idol for another person, although he is liable for lashes if a Jew makes an idol for a non-Jew, but he's allowed to get paid.
Why can't we go to see, for instance, the last in the Vatican?
Why can't we?
Many Rabbanim say you cannot go there and see Michelangelo's whatever.
Okay.
What is the reason?
Because they hold that Catholicism is a form of Avodah Zarah, and the Vatican is a Beit Avodah Zarah, so we're not allowed to go in. And there are a lot of.
But it's not bowing.
But it's a place of idol worship, and there are many Rabbanim who hold that it's prohibited to go into a church, for example. Not to mention a Reformed temple. The following rules apply when a person buys scrap metal from a Gentile and finds idols within it. If the Jew has already paid the money but has not taken possession, then he should return it to the Gentile. The same applies if he took possession but has not yet paid. Taking possession represents formal transfer of ownership. The transaction was made in error. If he paid the money and took possession of the scrap, then he has to take the idols and throw them into the Dead Sea. Similarly, when a Gentile and a convert divide the estate of their father, the Gentile, their father who is a Gentile, the convert may tell the Gentile, you take the idols and I'll take the money. You take the yain nesach, the forbidden wine, and I will take the produce. But if idols come into the possession of the convert, then they are prohibited, they're forbidden, and I would assume that the convert similarly has to take them and drop them in the Dead Sea. We are allowed to benefit from images which Gentiles made for aesthetic purposes. It is, however, forbidden to benefit from
purpose.
Yes, but it is forbidden to benefit from images made for the purpose of idol worship. What's this mean? It's forbidden to benefit from images found in villages, because one may assume they were made for the purpose of idol worship. When images are found in a city, they're forbidden only when found at the entrance to the city, and if it's a statue of a person holding a staff, or a bird, or a globe, or a sword, or a crown, or a ring. Otherwise, we may assume they were made for aesthetic purposes, and we're allowed to benefit from them. So, like in Far East, many large homes, buildings, have two lions at the entranceway, right? And the purpose of those lions is to chase away evil spirits. So, not so clear whether we could have those lions in our living room. Statues of false deities which are found discarded in the marketplace or in a scrap metal heap are permitted. And needless to say, this applies to pieces of the statues. Because obviously somebody threw out their idol because it wasn't doing them any good and they weren't worshiping it anymore. In contrast, if one finds a hand or a foot or another limb from the form of one of the constellations or celestial signs, it's forbidden to benefit from it. Since one knows that this limb is one of the images that's worshipped, the prohibition against benefiting from it remains until one knows that the Gentiles who worshipped it have nullified it. This is, I hope you guys are finding this amusing, okay, because I'm willing to, put it to a vote if you want to skip to the end of this sefer and go right to Hilchot Teshuvah. The following laws apply when a person finds articles that are made in the form of the sun or the moon or of a constellation. If they are made of gold or silver, or if they are silk garments, or if one of these forms is engraved on a nose ring or a finger ring, they're forbidden. If the forms are found on other articles, they're permitted, since we assume they were made for aesthetic purposes. Similarly, we assume any other form found on an article was intended for aesthetic purposes, and they are permitted. A false deity and its accoutrements and the objects offered to it are always forbidden. If an idol becomes mixed together with other statues made for aesthetic purposes, the entire group has to be taken to the Dead Sea. Right? So this is like in the laws of kashrut. There's a concept of batul b'shishim, right? If a little drop of milk falls into my meat cholent, if there's more than 60 times the meat than there is of the volume of milk, then it's batul, meaning that it stays kosher, right? If it's more, if the ratio is greater than 1 to 60, then we're not allowed to eat it. Okay, so similarly, there are certain things which you can never be mevatel in a mixture. Something that's called a bria, so an entire animal, right? Which could be like if you have a goat, or if a cat falls into your cholent, right? Boom. But also if a bug falls into your cholent. If a whole insect falls into the cholent, you can't be mevatel it, and it doesn't matter how small it was. So it could invalidate eating the whole cholent. So similarly, saying it doesn't matter if you have 1,000 statues and one of them was created for the purpose of idol worship and the others were all made for aesthetic purposes, but you can't tell which is which. Sorry, it invalidates the whole batch, and you have to throw them all out, and you have to take them to the Dead Sea and drop them in. Yes.
In summer, there are many mosquitoes around.
Yes.
Usually, you should not be allowed to kill mosquitoes just for the pleasure of to kill them.
Okay.
But if they are in the kitchen on Shabbos, in front of the cholent, what do?
Put a lid on the cholent.
No, come on. Yes. Okay.
I mean, you can't get them all.
You can't?
You cannot get them all.
No, if there is one, you don't have 20 in your room. You might have 1, 2.
Okay. Are you worried about getting bit by a mosquito, or are you worried about the mosquito falling into the cholent?
Also during the week. The problem is the same during the week. They are dirty. They're very dangerous.
Yeah.
They eat wreck, whatever.
Okay, so if you think that they're dangerous and you want to kill them, then, it's like you can make the case that you're, protecting yourself from danger. I'm not positive. When a person transgresses and sells a false deity or an object that was offered to it, it's forbidden to benefit from the money. Okay. When an Asherah or a false deity is burned, it's forbidden to benefit from the ashes. For example,
what ashes?
If you burn a false deity or an Asherah, one of the trees that are planted next to the altars of false deities, it's forbidden to benefit from the ashes or from the coals. If a ring used to adorn an idol becomes mixed together with 100 other rings, and then 2 of them fall into the sea, it's permissible to use all. This goes again like to the laws of kashrut, right? That if you had like 100 kosher meatballs and 1 treif meatball and they're all mixed together, so you can say, well, the meatball is like a davar chashuv. It's an important enough thing that you can't bottle it in the mixture. But then if 2 of them fall off the table and are crushed or whatever, then you can say, well, probably one of the ones that fell was the non-kosher one, so the rest of them were okay. Sitting under the shade of the trunk of an Asherah, whether that tree itself is worshipped or whether an idol was placed under it is forbidden. It is, however, permissible to sit under the shade of its branches and of its leaves. I don't know. Fine. If a person can follow another route, it is forbidden to pass under the tree. Right? In other words, we're not supposed to benefit from a tree that was planted for the purposes of idol worship. Like I said, I'm happy to take a vote on this. It's a very, very long sefer. We're more than halfway there.
We got the message.
Huh? For example, when the shrine of a false deity has a bathhouse or a garden, it is permitted to derive benefit from them, provided that one does not offer appreciation in return. If one must offer appreciation, it's forbidden. Like, come into the temple of great god Gumba and enjoy our beautiful gardens. Donations accepted. Okay, so you can go and sit in the garden, and if they come and they say, listen, you have to give a donation, then you have to leave. Okay. If the garden is mutually owned by the shrine and another entity, one may derive benefit from it, even if one provides the priests with appreciation, but you may not pay a fee. Okay? It is permitted to bathe in that bathhouse, even though an idol is located there, because it's placed there for aesthetic purposes and not to be served. However, obviously, this does not apply when the form of worshiping that idol is to undress and bathe naked before it. All right, then obviously, if that's the way that they worship this idol, then we can't do it. Okay, it is permitted to benefit from an animal slaughtered using a knife that is forbidden because of its connection to idol worship, because one is detracting from the value of the animal. If the animal is in danger of dying, it is prohibited because now one is increasing the value of the animal. And this improvement involves taking benefit from an accessory of idol worship. So this is an interesting halachic point, and it's the end of this particular parak, and it's maybe a good place for us to rest for today. Okay, that understand what he's saying. That we have an animal. It's a nice, big, healthy goat, and it's running around doing its goat thing, and we want to shecht it. And we have a knife, and the blade of the knife is in the proper shape, it's clean enough, and it's properly sharpened to be able to do shechita with it, so that just from a physical perspective, doing shechita with that knife would be kosher. Okay. However, it's a knife that was offered on the altar of the god of whatever. Okay, and so you have the goat, and you're hungry, and the only knife available is the knife that was offered to this god. You take this knife and you shech the goat, and it's a kosher shechita, and Rambam is saying because a live goat is worth, pick a number, 100 zuz. A shechted goat is worth $7.99 a pound, whatever it's worth. Okay, but it no longer has, for a live goat, if it's a female, gives milk. So there's an ongoing economic benefit from the goat that ends when the goat is shechted. So far, so good? So he's saying that even though you used a knife that is a knife of idol worship, you did not create a benefit from that knife. It's a halacha concept. We could say, of course I benefited from it. I shechted the goat. I wouldn't have been able to eat otherwise. Well, but no. Because again, he's not, this might strike us as, like a convoluted pilpul argument, but the fact is that from a halachic perspective, this is the way that the halacha works. Okay, the halachic definition of benefit is killing the animal reduces or stops the clock, if you will, on its economic value. Therefore, even though you were not supposed to use the knife, the shechita is kosher. But if the animal's about to die, when the animal dies by itself, we can't eat it. So, quick, I'm going to shech this animal before it dies. Okay, now you've created economic benefit to the animal. Because you couldn't have eaten it otherwise. You couldn't have gotten any, right? So now he's saying, no, now we're not allowed to use that knife because you got benefit from using that knife to shech the animal. Yes?
It wouldn't be kosher anyhow.
Because?
It was dying anyhow.
But you shecht it in time. Look, I'm not an expert on shechita.
No.
But if you shecht it on time...
If the animal's got an illness, it's going to kill it. No. It's not kosher anymore.
Fine. But there are animals that are like very old. Right? Our old cow, she's on her last legs. Well, should we shecht her and have and roast her now, or should we wait and one day we'll just find her lying dead in the barn? Right? Okay, yes, an animal that has a that has a fatal condition or an illness is a trefa, and we're not allowed to eat in any event.
So is one allowed to do that?
To shech the animal before it dies?
It's dying of old age, not a disease.
Yeah.
That's okay. Right?
Yeah, because old age is not considered a trefa. Trefa is an animal that no matter what happens, it's going to die in a year or less.
A dying animal that is suffering, like they do with the horses, can you kill it?
Interesting question. I would assume yes.
I would assume no.
I would assume yes. Can't kill a human being. Cannot kill a human being to put them out of their misery.
In war.
But you can. But an animal, I would say yes. So here's the deal, Chabad. This sefer goes on. We just finished the 7th parak. Okay, this goes on for another 5 prakim. In this edition, it's another 40 pages. We could spend a lot of time doing this.
We don't have to.
Or I could try to pick a couple of goodies, and then we can, or not even, and we can go on to Hilchot Teshuvah, which is really the capstone of Sefer Mada, and it's an amazing sefer.
Let's do the second choice.
It's good for us to. It's good for us to go.
What
over
are
it.
the highlight? What, you said there are a couple of highlights left in this book.
Yeah, well.
What are they? Anything that applies to us today practically?
It's forbidden to practice soothsaying as the idolaters do.
All right.
What does that mean? For example, those who say, "Since my piece of bread fell out of my mouth, my staff fell from my hand, I will not travel to this place today, because if I would go, I would not be able to accomplish my desire. Since a fox passed by me on my right side, I will not go out of my door today, because if I would go out, I would meet a deceiver."
Is there anything that applies to normal people?
When a person has been bitten by a scorpion or a snake, it's permitted to recite incantations over the bite, even on Shabbat, in order to settle his mind and strengthen his feelings. Okay, this goes to magic. Okay,
so anything that applies to normal people?
Well, I would say it may be worth it for us to do one shir on Rambam's approach to magic in general.
Yeah.
Where it's kind of a.
I think a lot of it depends upon what part of society you are part of in modern society. Because depending upon where you're at, a lot of these are very applicable today, although they sound crazy. When I was in Hollywood, one of the huge religions that was followed was the religion of Scientology.
Right, that's not normal, okay?
Well, in Hollywood,
Hollywood's not normal either.
Well, but there that was.
But I'm talking about normal people.
Well, that is for normal people. In that particular, on the left coast of the
left coast, they're crazy, right?
You know what? That's too. I'm sorry. That's too facile. That's too simplistic.
But
because there are people who look at us sitting here today, and they say, "Can you imagine these adults, they're educated, and they sit there reading this stuff that was written, thousands of years ago by a bunch of people who believe in some big man with a white beard who came down from the sky and put a couple of stones in some guy's hand, and now they live their whole lives based on this." So people, if you're outside of a group, you can look at them and say they're crazy, right? But but when you're inside a group, then we're the only ones who are sane.
Right. So what? Okay. So
transgenderism is crazy.
What would apply to people like us? We realize as a Torah he spoke, it's something that might have, that thing with if you're doing yoga, maybe.
Right.
What would apply to us today? We realize most of this other stuff is garbage.
Well, I would be.
I once had a girl over at my house on the Shabbos for Hollywood. I asked her, "Is anyone in Hollywood, these actors, anyone have normal family lives? They get married?" And
how would she know?
She said no.
She knows
she knew
everybody?
all the actors. She was from Los Angeles.
The problem is the demands of the entertainment industry.
All right, you can make an excuse.
No, I'm not. I worked in that industry for 40 years.
Yeah.
The problem in the whole Hollywood industry is it's client-driven.
It's what?
It's client-driven. You start your day at 3:30 in the morning. you don't finish until 11 o'clock at night, and you do this for 7 days a week until your project is finished.
Right.
And then the next project begins, and it's a crazy lifestyle.
Right, and they're crazy.
And that's why you've got the problems in Hollywood that you've got.
Right.
They're not crazy. They're not crazy. They live in their bubble.
They're in their bubble.
No, but we live in our bubble.
Okay,
We
fine.
need to acknowledge that as well.
Fine.
Okay.
So is it
in their bubble,
right?
Because they are. On the one hand, they are subject, as you say, to the whim of the market that they serve, and at the same time, they have everybody telling them that they're like this superior race of people, right? And so talk about a destabilizing mentality, right? That's what they're. So that's what they're stuck with, okay? So now somebody comes to them and says, you know what? I got this piece of paper. God put it in my hand, and you know what it says? It says here that if you do this, you'll be happy. And what they want more than anything else is they want to be happy. I didn't want, you know what? My parents were in show business, okay? And so they were more in New York. Okay? We didn't spend that much time in Hollywood, okay? But people want to be happy, and it's an industry that plays havoc with your ego. It's an industry that creates and attracts narcissistic people, and people who are narcissistic are by definition very unstable and very unsure of themselves. And if somebody comes along and says, I got the message and this will make you happy, they're going to say, Gewalt, that's what I want. Okay? And before we judge it, lahavdil, we have to look at there are other groups of people who also have a message that helps us to be happy. And we're blessed to be sitting here at a table with one of them today, which is Rabbi Goldberg, who goes out of his way every moment of his day on behalf of Klal Yisrael. So what Rambam is teaching us, what we said at the beginning of this year, right, is that when we talk about the halachas of Avodah Zarah and Avodat Kochavim, it's not that they're crazy. They are human. That Rambam himself says this is the fundamental human urge, which is we are bowled over when we look at the greatness of creation. And if we don't have the right path to follow, if somebody doesn't come and tell us, and it was only, all of human history, it was only Abraham Avinu who got that on his own. And so God, at a certain point, it says, so God said, if I don't give humanity the Torah, nobody else will ever come to this on his own. And so God had to give us the Torah. Okay? But it's very easy for, and I'm not criticizing anybody else here in this room, Khalil, because I do it myself all the time. It's very easy for us to look down at other people who, for the things that they believe or the way that they live. Okay? But we're all the same. We're all driven by this need to believe and to belong. And Baruch Hashem for Torah and for being in a place like this and for people who both lead and serve the community like Rabbi Goldberg.
There is a true mass insanity, and we're living through it now. And this is not a relativistic thing. It's truly insane.
Okay.
So the prohibition is having the lions at your front gate. So instead of that, I just have a sign that's a picture of a dog, and it says, ignore the dog, beware of owner. That's okay? That's permitted?
Well, no, we have a mezuzah.
Just checking. I really did.
I've been looking for a doormat for years that just says, NACHLAOT.
Rabbi, you're going to share some words with us.
Actually, I want to share with you a big mazel tov. Today is Rabbi Silver's birthday.
Thank you.
Shalom, shalom. It's a special day. Yesterday. It's never too late to share a special wish. Rabbi Diamond's coming in just a moment with a little surprise for Rabbi Silver and for everybody sitting around over here, because a birthday and a simcha is something to share with your friends and family, especially friends that are like family. And so please stay another moment or two. And Rabbi Diamond mentioned that it'll be another minute. Bezrat Hashem.
Okay. Yesterday was Shabbos. I couldn't reason
logic. Diamond and silver. There's like a connection. Goldberg. Goldberg, right?
Goldberg, silver. Here we are. We got all
Rabbi Platt will be here tomorrow.
Is there anything else in this book we're doing around that applies to people in our bubble?
And specifically Hilchot Avodat Kochavim. Rabbi, what we're talking about is thank you.
Rechamim. Mazel Tov. Mazel Tov, Rabbi Silver, on your birthday. Bezrat Hashem, many happy and healthy years. La'or Rechamim v'shanim tovot.
Amen. We should learn Torah together for many, many decades.
Amen. Amazing.
Thank you. Okay, I guess we need to eat
We've
cake.
got it's part of the mitzvah.
I've been here 15 and a half years.
Okay.
Is it part of it?
Amazing.
Cold?
We lived
Can't tell.
farm
Is it?
down near Northeast High.
I think
Okay. Who's going to take over here?
he is on another, but that's why. That's
The
why
plates?
I can try.
The plates?
Yeah.
They don't want to